Today we have Mr. Shashank Srivastava, Executive Director, Marketing Sales, Maruti Suzuki India, and he will explain to us that the rising force of SUVs may have taken the market by storm, but it's still the hatchbacks that remain the best-selling vehicles in the country. So, sir, first and foremost, we all know that the SUV segment has been growing by leaps and bounds for the last 5, 6 years now. Why are they trending so much?
A couple of reasons which are clear why SUVs seem to be doing very well. The first is, uh, I think, based purely on economy, which is that the cost of acquisition of SUVs, especially the entry SUVs, has now come down because of the GST rate concessions which they enjoy, the 4 meter, the sub 4 meter SUVs. As a result, now there is a lot of price overlap between premium hatchback, the entry sedan, and the entry SUVs. And that means that the cross consideration for consumers when he's making his choices for the product is increasing across the different segments. So I think that's one of the major reasons, and that's mainly for the entry SUV. And entry SUV, as you know, is now almost 22% of the market, and in fact, more than 50% of the overall SUV market. So that's clear that since 2016, when the entry SUV market was just about 4 or 5%, it has now become about 21, 22% this year. That's one point. The other point is a preference for design, and I think in that respect, this seems to be a global phenomena across the globe. If you look at Latin America, you look at Europe yeah, or China, US, the preference for SUV type of design seems to have increased. And by SUV type of design, of course, it means one, the tall driving stance, the more upright position for on the road presence, sheer road presence itself. Second, the higher ground clearance, the larger tires, and I think the flexibility that of space, which is and the maximization of space that SUV's body type offers, are the main reasons why SUV as a body type is being preferred as a design across the globe. And India is, of course, no different in that respect.
Sir, but in reality, it's the bread and butter hatchbacks that remain top selling vehicles every month. Now, there's a misconception that, even if SUVs are expanding, it's at the cost of the hatchbacks, which is not true. I mean, the
Mm.
segment hasn't expanded as we used to see or grow as we used to see earlier, but it hasn't lost its share either.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right, and I think it's very well said because the statistics point out exactly what you just mentioned. The first thing which is very clear is that even though SUV percentage of the overall market has been going up, it was in the last financial year 32% against just about 23, 24% it used to be about 5 or 6 years back. Now, in the same period, so if you look at the period 2014 onwards, 2014, the total percentage of the hatches is roughly about 47% of the total market. Now that has remained in that range, 47 to 46, for the last 7 years. So while it has not grown as a percentage of the total market, so if you look at 2020-21, the hatches still form 46.5% of the overall market. So which is roughly similar to what it was 7 years back. So you are right that the gain in SUV does not seem to have come from hatches. Clearly, hatches are larger because they are 46.5% compared with the 32% for the SUVs. So first of all, that is one point which seems to be clear. It is larger. Second, that this has remained steady. So the gain in SUV percentage is actually the not at the cost of hatches, but it's more at the cost of the sedans, as we observe. because sedans 5 or 6 years back were about 23-24% of the market, and this calendar year they are about 9.5%, and for the financial year just around 10.5%. So yes, you are right. Hatches are still the largest one. Second, they have while not grown as much as SUVs, but they have not lost either. And I think the gain in SUVs is largely at the cost of sedans.
Right. And so I think this also remains the same with the aftermarket as well, right? The second-hand market. It's the first-time buyer, maybe a new car buyer or second-hand. It's still the preference is hatchbacks, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct. So, the other thing, which is also a great point actually, because the other thing which is very clearly observed from an Indian market perspective is that the first-time buyer are still around that 48-50% mark, and I think the reason is that the basic demography of India is quite young, and you can see and since the economy is growing, you see a lot of new people coming in the workforce, and therefore as both from a demographic and an economic point of view, first time buyers have remained remarkably same as a percentage of the overall market, so roughly 48 to 50% for the last 20-22 years. So, and the preference for hatches within the first time buyers have also remained in that 58-60% mark for the last 6-7 years. So I think both because there is a steady inflow of new buyers who are first time buyers, and also that their preference for the hatch as a body type has remained about 58-60%, has ensured that the hatch remain a large portion of the market.
So in the hatchbacks segment, now it's divided into the entry level as well as the premium section.
Yeah.
Now, do you see, as we spoke about the first time buyers, once they buy the entry level cars, do you see a trend where they are skipping straight to the sub 4 meter SUVs rather than opting for the premium hatchbacks?
It is possible. It is possible. Although, as I said, there is no conclusive evidence, but there is clearly the among the entry SUV buyers, the first-time buyers have increased. So they used to about 5-10% earlier. They have increased. So of the total sale of entry SUVs, first-time buyers have increased. But of the first-time buyers, the percentage of sale for hatches has remained the same as I told you, 58-60%. On the premium hatches, actually, both as a percentage of the total market of the hatch, the premium hatches remain also remarkably in that range of 50%. So, of the total hatches which are sold, 50% is hatch is premium hatch, and that has been the story for the last 10 years. So, in 2011, also the premium hatches were about 22-23% of the overall market, and 50% of the hatch market, whereas the entry hatches were 50% of the hatch, that is the balance 23%. So that is how that 46% is divided, roughly half between entry hatches and the premium hatches.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, Now also with as you we mentioned before that SUVs are the hot sellers. So what is Maruti's plan in India? What about the SUV range? What is the expansion plans for this
Yeah.
segment?
Yeah, so it's a very interesting question, and I think the quite common question as well, because one of the things, one of the objectives Maruti Suzuki has mentioned is to have half the Indian market, which is 50% of the market. And if you look at the last 4 years, we have been able to achieve 50% market share in the retail passenger vehicle market in India. So we would obviously like that to continue. But to continue to maintaining that 50% market share, we need to also dominate across all large segments. And if we see the hatches, which is the largest segment, we have about 66% market share. So if you look at passenger cars, for example, our market share is about 62.4. If you look at MPVs, our market share is like 64. So if you look at vans, then our market share is about 96%. If you look at other than SUV market, then market share is 65% for Maruti Suzuki. Maruti Suzuki has a 65% market share if we leave aside the SUVs. However, when you include the SUV, the market share falls down. It comes to just under 50%. This year it is actually less than that, but just around that 50% mark. So one of the obvious thing is that if we want to continue dominance in the overall market, you need to dominate the SUV market also, because SUV market also now is pretty big. In this calendar year, it was almost 39% of the market. Financial year, it was 32%. So clearly in our product portfolio, we need to strengthen it, strengthen the SUV part as well, because while in the entry SUV market, Brezza remains the market leader ever since it was introduced in 2016, but it is much more fragmented. Today, SUVs, there are about 43 brands in the SUV space in India. Maruti has two of them, the S-Cross and the Brezza. So that obviously is insufficient. So we need to strengthen that segment, and that's what we hope to do in the future.
So I think only Maruti can say just 10-50% market share. Um, but coming back to this day and age, it's all about platform sharing.
Yeah.
So can we see that translating that platform sharing translation happening between hatchbacks and SUVs?
It's possible, of course. Definitely. I mean, you're right. Over the globally, actually, we have a clear case where for cost optimization, we have now platforms, and in some case modular platforms, which are which basically means that you use common platforms for different body types. So yes, that's possible. You're absolutely right.
Okay, so just a final question. Now, this is a bit of a redundant question, but unfortunately, we get this question quite a bit. And again, going back to just the SUV segment, and since BS6 emissions kicked in, a lot of companies, including Maruti, stopped rolling out diesel-powered cars.
Yeah.
Now looking at the SUV segment, where a lot of companies, all major companies rather, are focusing on that, do you
Yeah.
see by not having a diesel option that a company suffers, or it's just a matter of change in mindset in the buyer's side?
Yeah. So it's a combination of both. I think one, clearly, diesel market has shrunk dramatically, and if you look at the diesel market this year, it's around 18% of the total industry. Last year also it was around the same percentage, 18%, but it had dropped down from the highs about 7-8 years back. It was 60% of the market. So what was 60% became 50, became 46, became 33, became 22, and now 18%. But 18% is still there. There is no doubt. But the interesting part comes when you go into the segment wise analysis. So if you look at hatches, for example, it is just around 1%. If you look at the passenger cars overall, which is hatch and sedan, the diesel share is just 2%. Where it is doing, even in entry SUVs, it is about 20% now. Where it is doing better is in the mid SUV category. And the reason why it does well there is because there probably a lot of consumers do not have economics as the criteria for uh, choice of fuel. They are looking at a higher torque probably, which makes them go for diesel. Otherwise, from the economic point of view, one of the big reasons why diesel has suddenly come down is because, one, the cost of petrol and the diesel as a fuel have become roughly similar, and the cost of running therefore has also become similar. So it's around 5 rupee 10 paise for a petrol and for a diesel, roughly similar. Whereas for CNG, for example, it is just one third of that. So on the running cost aspect, because the fuel price has gone up both for petrol as well as for diesel, and the gap between diesel and gasoline price per liter has actually collapsed. In some states, I am aware it is about 10, 11 rupees. But in most, if you do a weighted average, it is just around 4 or 5 rupees. In fact, in Gujarat, in Jharkhand, in Orissa, in Goa, the price of diesel and petrol fuel is roughly similar. So obviously, there is no economic logic now to go in for diesel, especially when the cost of acquisition of diesel vehicles have gone up since BS6. Because earlier the gap between a petrol and a diesel vehicle for similar specs was about a lakh or so, but it has gone up to 150, 170,000 after BS6. And when the RD norms kick in, which is expected next
Yes.
year, then it is
Yes.
expected that that gap will actually become even more. That means that the diesel will further come down, and that is what is our assessment. That's the reason why we have said we will not be interested in the diesel currently. Second, on the CNG aspect, which is what is the alternate fuel type, we have seen that CNG growth has been tremendous, and we have somehow been able to replace these diesel volumes of ours with the CNG vehicles.
Okay. Right.
Yeah, yeah.
So thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, Aru.